How are you guys doing? Today is Monday, December 13th, 2021. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to review the Elite matchups and performances that took place yesterday on Sunday, December 12th, 2021. And just before I get in, I'm just going to take a quick step back and look at where we are in the calendar year. I'm looking at where we are. We still have bowl games and playoff games left in college football. In the NFL, there's still about a month left in the NFL season. Taking a look at what's going on with basketball, both the college and the pro seasons are underway as they're going to go well into the 2022 calendar year. And taking a look at what's going on with soccer, since we are hitting the end of the calendar year, we are reaching the midway point for a lot of domestic leagues and a lot of international tournaments. With that said, starting first, taking a look at what's going on at the collegiate level, starting with basketball because we're still waiting for football pro games to start or bowl games to start. Looking at the top-ranked college basketball team in the nation, the Purdue Boilermakers faced off against the unranked North Carolina State Wolfpack at the Basketball Hall of Fame Invitational. Purdue would end up beating unranked North Carolina State 82-72 after outscoring North Carolina State 16-6 in overtime in order to pick up this win. On the winning end of this matchup, the Boilermakers were led in scoring by their starting guard, Jaden Ivey. Their starting sophomore out of South Bend would go on to finish with 22 points. He would also go on to put up 7 rebounds and 3 blocks in 39 minutes. He shot 7 for 16 from the field, 2 for 6 from 3, and 6 for 9 from the foul line. And then Purdue's forward off the bench, Travion Williams, their senior out of Chicago, will go on to finish with 22 points, 12 rebounds, 9 assists, 2 steals, and 4 blocks in 33 minutes as he shot 10 for 14 from the field. And with this win, the top-ranked Purdue Boilermakers are 9-1 on the year. With this loss, the unranked North Carolina State Wolfpack is now 7-3. Looking at the second-ranked team in the nation, the defending champs Baylor Bears hosted the 6th-ranked Villanova Wildcats for this Big East Big 12 battle. The defending champs would end up beating Villanova 57-36 after outscoring Villanova by 10 in the first half and by 11 in the second. On the losing end of this matchup, the 6th-ranked Villanova Wildcats were led in scoring by their starting guard Justin Moore. Their junior out of Maryland would go on to finish with 15 points and 6 rebounds in 33 minutes. He shot 5 for 14 from the field and a perfect 3 for 3 from the foul line. On the winning end of this matchup, the second-ranked Baylor Bears were led in scoring by their starting guard, James Akinjo. Their senior out of Oakland, California, will go on to finish with 16 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 steals in 35 minutes. He shot 6 for 15 from the field and a perfect 2 for 2 from the foul line. With this win, the second-ranked Baylor Bears are 9-0. With this loss, the 6th-ranked Villanova Wildcats are 7-3. Taking a look at the 16th-ranked team in the nation, the USC Trojans hosted the unranked Long Beach State Beach. USC would end up beating Long Beach State 73-62, winning this matchup by 11 after they outscored Long Beach State by 11 in the second half. On the winning end of this matchup, the 16th-ranked USC Trojans were led in scoring by their starting forward, Isaiah Mobley. He finished with 21 points, 12 rebounds, and 2 blocks in 37 minutes. He shot 8 for 15 from the field, 2 for 5 from 3, and he shot 3 for 4 from the foul line. With this win, the 16th-ranked USC Trojans remain undefeated as they are now 10-0 on the season. With this loss, unranked Long Beach State is now 3-7. Looking at what's going on with the 17th-ranked team in the nation, the Iowa State Cyclones hosted the unranked Jackson State Tigers. Iowa State would end up beating Jackson State 47-37, winning this matchup by 10 after they outscored Jackson State by 8 in the first half. On the winning end of this matchup, the Cyclones were led in scoring by their forward off the bench, Ajaz Kunk. Their senior out of Slovenia will go on to finish with 12 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 steals. He would do this in 30 minutes as he shot 3 for 5 from the field. He shot a perfect 3 for 3 from 3, and he shot 3 for 4 from the foul line. With this win, the 17th-ranked Iowa State Cyclones remain undefeated as they are now 10-0 on the season. With this loss, the unranked Jackson State Tigers are now 2-7. Taking a look at the 20th ranked team in the nation, the Florida Gators faced off against the unranked Maryland Terrapins at the Basketball Hall of Fame Invitational. The unranked Terps would end up beating the ranked Gators 70-68 to upset them. They won this game 70-68 after both teams were tied at 30 at halftime. On the losing end of this matchup, the 20th ranked Florida Gators were led in scoring by their starting guard, Flanders Fleming Jr. Their senior out of Athens, Georgia, would finish with 15 points, 11 rebounds, and 2 blocks in 33 minutes. He shot 3 for 12 from the field, 2 for 5 from 3, and 7 for 8 from the foul line. And then off the bench, Florida's guard out of Arkansas, Tyree Appleby, would go on to finish with 15 points in 27 minutes. He shot 5 for 9 from the field. He shot 5 for 8 from 3. On the winning end of this matchup, the unranked Maryland Terrapins were led in scoring by their 2 guards. Eric Ayala, their senior out of Delaware, would go on to finish with 19 points and 5 rebounds in 38 minutes. He shot 6 for 11 from the field, 3 for 5 from 3, and 4 for 5 from the foul line. Their other starting guard, Fats Russell out of Philadelphia, would go on to finish with 19 points and 5 turnovers in 37 minutes. He shot 7 for 13 from the field, a perfect 3 for 3 from 3, and he shot 2 for 3 from the foul line. With this win, the unranked Maryland Terrapins are 6-4 on the year. With this loss, the 20th ranked Florida Gators are now 7-3. Last but not least, taking a look at what's going on with the 23rd ranked team in the nation, the Seton Hall Pirates hosted the unranked Rutgers Scarlet Knights, and the ranked Pirates were able to beat Rutgers 77-63. Seton Hall ended up beating Rutgers by 14 after they outscored Rutgers by 10 in the first half. On the winning end of this matchup, the Seton Hall Pirates were led in scoring by their guard off the bench, Bryce Aiken out of Randolph, New Jersey. Bryce Aiken would go on to finish with 22 points in 29 minutes as he went on to shoot 7 for 12 from the field, 3 for 7 from 3, and a perfect 5 for 5 from the foul line. With this win, the 23rd ranked Seton Hall Pirates are now 9-1 as they are undefeated at home. With this loss, the unranked Rutgers Scarlet Knights are 5-5 as they still have yet to pick up a win on the road. Taking a look at what's going on at the professional level, starting off with the NFL, looking at the 14th Sunday of the NFL season. Starting off in Charlotte, the Carolina Panthers hosted the Atlanta Falcons within their division, the NFC South. The Atlanta Falcons would end up beating the Panthers 29-21 after they outscored the Panthers 17-7 in the first half. The Panthers would outscore the Falcons 14-12 in the second half, but it just wouldn't be enough. On the losing end of this matchup, the Panthers were led by their starting quarterback and former NFL MVP Cam Newton. Cam Newton would throw for 178 yards and an interception. He also ran the ball for 47 yards and a touchdown. Cam Newton, of course, would combine for 225 total yards of offense and his only touchdown coming on the ground. Their leading receiver, Robbie Anderson, had 7 receptions for 84 yards and the lone receiving touchdown. DJ Moore had 6 receptions for 84 yards as well. On the defensive side of the ball, Jeremy Chin led the Panthers in tackles as he had 13 of them. Shaq Thompson had 11 tackles. On the winning end of this matchup, the Atlanta Falcons were led by their elite starting quarterback, Matt Ryan, out of Boston College. Ryan would complete 19 of his 28 passes as he threw for 190 yards and a touchdown. He also ran for 3 yards, so that's 193 total yards of offense. Their leading rusher, Cordero Patterson, had 16 carries for 58 yards and a touchdown, not to mention an additional receiving yard. So he had 59 total yards of offense with his rushing touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball for Atlanta, Foyesade Olokun would lead the team in tackles as he had 7 tackles on the day. A.J. Terrell would record an interception to go along with his 4 tackles. And then Michael Walker would post a 66-yard pick 6 as he wouldn't have a tackle for himself, but with that interception, he helped the Falcons pick up their 6th win of the season. With this win, the Falcons are now 6-7. With this loss, the Carolina Panthers are now 5-8. Taking a look now at what's going on in Cleveland, the Cleveland Browns hosted the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens would end up beating their division rivals. They won this game 24-22 after they shut Baltimore out 24-6, or they outscored them 24-6 in the first half. Baltimore shut Cleveland out in the second half 16-0, but they wouldn't score enough as they would eventually make it, as they did score a touchdown in the final minute to bring it to within 2, but they weren't able to score again. On the losing end of this matchup, the Baltimore Ravens were led by their elite starting quarterback Lamar Jackson, as he would throw for 17 yards and rush for 5. He would eventually get benched for Tyler Huntley. Huntley threw for 270 yards and a touchdown as he ran for an additional 45. That's 315 total yards of offense for Tyler Huntley. Their leading receiver was their tight end, Mark Andrews, as he had 11 receptions for 115 yards and the lone receiving touchdown for Baltimore. Rashad Bateman finished the day with 7 receptions for 103 yards. On the defensive side of the ball, Brandon Stevens led the Ravens in tackles as he finished with 8 of them on the day. Anthony Avery would finish with the team's lone interception as he had 5 tackles to go along with it. On the winning end of this matchup, the Cleveland Browns were led by their starting quarterback, former number 1 overall pick Baker Mayfield. He threw for 190 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception, as he also ran for 14. That's 214 yards of offense. Their elite running back, Nick Chubb, would finish with 59 yards on the ground and 6 yards through the air. That's 65 total yards of offense. The Browns' leading receiver was Donovan Peoples-Jones out of Michigan. He had 5 receptions for 90 yards. On the defensive side of the ball, their leading tackler was Grant Delpit. He finished with 11 tackles on the day. Their elite defensive end, Myles Garrett, would finish with 3 tackles, as he also finished with a sack and a fumble recovery. Jadeveon Clowney would finish with 3 tackles as he had a sack and a half. With this win, the Cleveland Browns are now 7-6. With this loss, the Baltimore Ravens are officially 8-5 on the season. Looking out to Nashville, the Tennessee Titans hosted the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they were able to shut the Jaguars out and win this matchup 20-0, outscoring the Jaguars 10-0 in both halves. On the losing end of this matchup, the Jaguars were led by their young elite starting quarterback, the number 1 overall pick from the 2021 NFL Draft, Trevor Lawrence. Lawrence would complete 24 of his 40 passes as he threw for 221 yards and 4 interceptions. He also ran for 2 yards, so that's 223 total yards of offense. On the defensive side of the ball for the Jaguars, their leading tackler was Damian Wilson, as he had 10 tackles. He even had a sack to himself. And on the winning side of this matchup, the Tennessee Titans were led by their starting quarterback out of Texas A&M, Ryan Tannehill. Tannehill threw for 191 yards. He ran for an additional 29 and a touchdown as he finished with 220 total yards of offense. Their leading tackler on the defensive end was Rashaan Evans. He finished with 6 tackles on the day. Busker Shrine, Jayon Brown, Rashaan Evans, and Christian Fulton would each add an interception for the Tennessee Titans on the defensive end. With this win, the Tennessee Titans are now 9-4. With this loss, the Jacksonville Jaguars are now 2-11. I'm taking a look now at what's going on in Kansas City. The reigning AFC champs, Kansas City Chiefs, hosted the Las Vegas Raiders from within their division, the AFC West. The Chiefs would beat the Raiders 48-9 after they outscored the Raiders 35-3 in the first half, and then 13-6 in the second. On the losing end of this matchup, the Las Vegas Raiders were led by their starting quarterback, Derek Carr. He threw for 263 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. The Raiders' leading receiver was Hunter Renfrow. He had 13 receptions for 117 yards and the team's lone receiving touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Davine Diablo and Jonathan Abram would each finish with the team high in tackles, as they each had a tackle each. On the winning end of this matchup, the Kansas City Chiefs were led by their elite starting quarterback, the $500 million man out of Texas Tech, Patrick Mahomes. He would complete 20 of his 24 passes as he threw for 258 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also ran for an additional 20 yards, so Mahomes had 278 total yards of offense. Their leading rusher, Derek Gore, had 9 carries for 66 yards and a touchdown. He also had 2 receptions for 23 yards, as he would go on to finish with 89 total yards of offense. Their second leading rusher, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the former national champion out of LSU, finished with 10 carries for 37 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. He had 5 yards through the air, so he had 42 total yards of offense with his 2 touchdowns. And then through the air, their elite wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, would be their leading receiver. He had 4 receptions for 76 yards on the day. On the defensive side of the ball, Mike Hughes would finish with 9 tackles on the day. Their elite safety, Tyrann Mathieu, would finish with 5 tackles as he recovered a fumble. also for them. Alex Okafor would finish with 3 tackles as he had a sack and a half. And then not to mention, in addition with Tyrann Mathieu' fumble recovery and 5 tackles, he did register Kansas City's lone interception of the day. With this win, the Kansas City Chiefs are now 9-4. With this loss, the Las Vegas Raiders are now 6-7 on the season. Taking a look now at what's going on in New York, the Jets hosted the New Orleans Saints. The Saints would end up beating the Jets 30-9. They won this game by 21 after they outscored the Jets. They outscored the Jets 10-6 in the first half. They outscored the Jets 20-3 in the second half. On the losing end of this matchup, the New York Jets were led by the number 2 overall pick from the 2021 NFL Draft, Zach Wilson. Wilson threw for 202 yards, and he was also the Jets' leading rusher with 33 yards on the ground. He had 235 total yards of offense. On the defensive side for the Jets, their leading tackler was C.J. Mosley out of Alabama. He had 17 of them. Elijah Riley had 10 tackles himself. On the winning end of this matchup, the New Orleans Saints were led by their starting quarterback, Taysom Hill. Hill threw for 175 yards. He ran for 73 yards, and both of his touchdowns were on the ground. He would finish with 248 total yards of offense in his name. Their elite running back, Alvin Kamara, was their leading rusher. He had 27 carries for 120 yards and a rushing touchdown. He also had 4 receptions for 25 yards. He had 145 total yards of offense for the Saints. On the defensive side of the ball, Demario Davis was their leading tackler. He had 8 of them on the day. Quan Alexander would finish with 4 tackles as he had 2 sacks. With this win, the New Orleans Saints are now 6-7. With this loss, the New York Jets are now 3-10 on the season as everything stands. Taking a look at what's going on in our nation's capital, the Washington football team hosted the Dallas Cowboys from within the NFC East. The Cowboys would end up beating the Washington football team 27-20 after they shut Washington out 24-0 in the first half. Washington would outscore Dallas 20-3 in the second half, but it just simply wouldn't be enough. On the losing end of this matchup, Washington was led by their starting quarterback, Taylor Heineke. Heineke threw for 122 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He also ran for 8 yards. That's 130 total yards of offense. Through the air, their leading receiver was Cam Sims. He had 3 receptions for 69 yards as he had the team's lone receiving touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Cole Holcomb and Cameron Curl would lead Washington in tackles as they each had 8 tackles. Their safety, Landon Collins, would finish with 5 tackles as he had 2 of the team's 4 sacks. Landon Collins would also have an interception. And going back to Cole Holcomb, who led the team in tackles with 8 of them, he also registered a 31-yard pick 6. On the winning end of this matchup, the Dallas Cowboys were led by their starting quarterback out of Mississippi State, Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott threw for 211 yards, an interception, he threw for a touchdown and 2 interceptions. He also ran for 15 yards. So that's 226 total yards of offense. Their elite running back, Ezekiel Elliott, had 12 carries for 45 yards on the ground. He was their leading rusher. He also had 15 yards through the air, so he had 60 total yards of offense. Their third leading receiver, their elite wide receiver, Amari Cooper, finished with 5 receptions for 51 yards as he finished with the team's lone receiving touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Jordan Lewis would lead the team in tackles alongside Dorrance Armstrong. Lewis had 6 tackles alongside his recovered fumble. Dorrance Armstrong also had 6 tackles and a recovered fumble. Randy Gregory would finish with a tackle, a sack, and an interception for the team. With this win, the Dallas Cowboys are now 9-4. With this loss, the Washington football team is now 6-7 on the season. Taking a look at what's going on in Houston, the Texans hosted the Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks would end up beating the Houston Texans 33-13. They would win this matchup by 20. They outscored the Texans 16-13 in the first half before shutting them out 17-0 in the second half. On the losing end of this matchup, the Houston Texans were led by their starting quarterback, Davis Mills. Mills threw for 331 yards and a touchdown. He also ran for 8 yards. He had 339 total yards of offense. The Texans' leading receiver was Brandon Cooks. He had 8 receptions for 101 yards on the day. On the defensive side of the ball, Christian Kirksey would lead the Texans in tackles as he had 10 of them. On the winning end of this matchup, the Seattle Seahawks were led by their elite starting quarterback and the 2020 NFL Walter Payton Man of the Year, Russell Wilson. The 2021 Walter Payton Man of the Year, Russell Wilson. He would go on to complete 17 of his 28 passes. He would go on to throw for 260 yards and 2 touchdowns. He would also run for 8 yards, so that's 268 total yards of offense. The Seahawks' leading rusher was Rashad Penny. He had 16 carries for 137 yards and he had 2 rushing touchdowns on the ground, even had a receiving touchdown through the air. He had 138 total yards of offense. The Seahawks' leading receiver was Tyler Lockett. He had 5 receptions for 142 yards and a touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, their elite middle linebacker Bobby Wagner would lead the team in tackles as he had 15 of them, and Jordan Brooks would finish with 10 tackles for himself. With this win, the Seattle Seahawks are now 5-8. With this loss, the Houston Texans are now officially 2-11 on the season. Of course, taking a look now at what's going on in Denver in the Mile High City, the Denver Broncos hosted the Detroit Lions, who came into this matchup with only 1 win. The Broncos would make sure that the Lions left with only 1 win. The Broncos would beat the Lions 38-10. They outscored the Lions 17-10 in the first half before shutting them out 21-0 in the second half. On the losing end of this matchup, the Lions were led in scoring by their starting quarterback, Jared Goff. Goff, out of the former number 1 overall pick out of Cal, threw for 215 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He also ran for 10 yards, so he had 225 total yards of offense. Detroit's leading rusher was Craig Reynolds. He had 11 carries for 83 yards on the day. He also had 16 receiving yards, so he finished with 99 total yards on the day. On the defensive side of the ball, the Lions were led in tackles by Josh Woods. He finished with 13 tackles. And then on the winning end of this matchup, the Denver Broncos were led by their starting quarterback out of Louisville, Teddy Bridgewater. Bridgewater threw for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns. Denver's leading rusher, Melvin Gordon III, finished with 24 carries for 111 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then their second leading rusher, Javonte Williams, finished with 15 carries for 73 rushing yards as he had the 3rd rushing touchdown on the day. He also had a 10-yard receiving touchdown, so he finished with 83 yards and 2 touchdowns on the day. On the defensive end for the Broncos, their safety Justin Simmons would lead the team in tackles as he had 6 of them. Draymond Jones would finish with 3 tackles as he had both of the team's sacks. And going back to Justin Simmons, who led the team in tackles, he also had the team's lone interception. With this win, the Denver Broncos are now 7-6. With this loss, the Detroit Lions are now 1-11-1. Taking a look now at what is going on in Los Angeles, the LA Chargers hosted the New York Giants. The Chargers would end up beating the Giants 37-21 as the Chargers outscored the Giants 24-7 in the first half. The Giants outscored the Chargers 14-13 in the second half, but they would not come close to what the Chargers did. The big difference being the second quarter where the Chargers put up a 17-0 quarter. On the losing end of this matchup, the New York Giants were led by their starting quarterback, Mike Glennon. Glennon threw for 191 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. He also carried the ball for 7 yards for an additional touchdown. He had 198 yards of offense with his 3 touchdowns. Their lead running back, Saquon Barkley, was their leading rusher. He had 16 carries for 64 yards. He also had 3 receptions for 31 yards as his only touchdown came on the receiving end. He finished with 95 total yards of offense alongside his receiving touchdown. Their second leading rusher, Devontae Booker, had 8 carries for 56 yards. He also had 4 receptions for 28 yards as he will go on to finish with 84 total yards of offense for the day. On the defensive side of the ball, Aaron Robinson and Logan Ryan led the team in tackles as they each had 9 of them. On the winning end of this matchup, the LA Chargers were led by their young elite starting quarterback, the reigning NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, Justin Herbert. He would go on to complete 23 of his 31 passes as he threw for 275 yards and 3 touchdowns. He would run for an additional 19 yards. That's 294 total yards of offense. Their leading rusher, Austin Eckler, had 12 carries for 67 yards and a rushing touchdown. He also had 17 yards through the air as he had 84 total yards from scrimmage for the Chargers on the day. The Chargers' leading receiver, Jalen Guyton, had 3 receptions for 85 yards and a receiving touchdown. Their second leading receiver, Josh Palmer, had 5 receptions as he had 66 yards and a touchdown himself. On the defensive side of the ball, Kazir White led the team in tackles as he had 10 of them. And Nick Neiman would finish with the team's lone interception. And of course, with this win, and he would go along to finish with 1 tackle. Also, their elite defensive end out of Ohio State, Joey Bosa, would register a sack for himself. With this win, the LA Chargers are now 8-5 on the season. And of course, with this loss, the New York Giants are now 4-9. Taking a look now at what's going on in Cincinnati, the Bengals hosted the San Francisco 49ers. The Niners would end up beating the Bengals 26-23 after the Bengals would kick a field goal in overtime, but the Niners would win the game off of a touchdown, actually, a 12-yard touchdown pass from Jimmy Garoppolo to Brandon Ayuk. But of course, going into the fourth quarter, the Bengals had to score. The Bengals scored 14 points, outscored the Niners 14-0 in the fourth quarter to go to overtime in the first place. But the Niners were the team to pull away with the win. On the losing end of this matchup, the Bengals were led by the number 1 overall pick from the 2020 NFL Draft, Joe Burrow. Burrow threw for 348 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also ran for 3 yards, so he had 351 total yards of offense. The Bengals' leading rusher, Joe Mixon, had 58 yards on the ground and 10 through the air, so he had 68 total yards of offense. Their leading receiver was T. Higgins out of Clemson. He finished with 5 receptions for 114 yards. Their second leading receiver, their rookie Jamar Chase, finished with 5 receptions for 77 yards as he had both of the team's receiving touchdowns. On the defensive side of the ball, Von Bell would lead the Bengals in tackles as he had 10 of them. And then on the winning end of this matchup, the San Francisco 49ers were led by their starting quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo. Garoppolo threw for 296 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also ran for an additional 3, so he had 299 total yards of offense. Their leading rusher, Jeff Wilson Jr., had 56 yards on the ground. Their second leading rusher, Deebo Samuel, had 8 carries for 37 yards and a touchdown on the ground. He also had a 22-yard reception. He had 59 total yards of offense to go along with his rushing touchdown. Their leading receiver was their elite tight end, George Kittle. Kittle finished with 13 receptions for 151 yards and a touchdown. Brandon Ayuk, their second leading receiver, had 6 receptions for 62 yards as he had the 49ers' other receiving touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Azeez Al-Shaair would lead the team in tackles as he had 11 of them. He also posted a sack. The 49ers' elite defensive end, Nick Bosa, finished with 3 tackles as he had 2 sacks for himself. With this win, the San Francisco 49ers are 7-6. And of course, with this loss, the Cincinnati Bengals now dropped to 7-6 as well. Taking a look now at what went down in Florida and Tampa Bay, the reigning Super Bowl champs hosted the Buffalo Bills, and the Buccaneers would end up beating the Bills 33-27 in overtime. Leading up to overtime, the Buccaneers outscored the Bills 24-3 in the first half. The Bills outscored the Bucs 24-3 in the second half. And then in overtime, it would be a 58-yard touchdown pass from Tom Brady to Brashad Perriman to win this matchup for the Buccaneers and to keep them undefeated at home ever since they won the Super Bowl at home. On the losing end of this matchup, the Buffalo Bills were led by their elite starting quarterback, Josh Allen. Allen completed 36 of his 54 passes as he threw for 308 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Allen also ran for 109 yards and a touchdown as he combined for 417 total yards of offense and 3 touchdowns. Their second leading rusher, Devin Singletary, had 4 carries for 52 yards. He also had 6 receptions for 37 yards as he combined for 89 total yards of offense. Their third leading receiver, Dawson Knox, had 7 receptions for 60 yards and a touchdown. Their elite wide receiver, Stephon Diggs, led the team in receiving yards as he had 7 receptions for 74 yards. On the defensive side of the ball, the Bills' elite linebacker, Tremaine Edmonds, would lead the team in tackles. He had 12 of them. Jordan Poyer would finish with 10 tackles himself. And then, of course, on the winning end of this matchup, the defending champs, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, were led by their goated starting quarterback, Tom Brady. Tom Brady would complete 31 of his 46 passes as he threw for 363 yards and 2 touchdowns. He would run for an additional 16 yards and a touchdown. He finished with 379 total yards of offense and 3 total touchdowns. The Buccaneers' leading rusher was Leonard Fournette out of LSU. He had 19 carries for 113 yards and a touchdown on the ground. He had 19 yards through the air, so that's 132 total yards of offense. The Buccaneers' leading receiver was Chris Godwin out of Penn State. He finished with 10 receptions for 105 yards. Their second leading receiver was their elite wide receiver out of Texas A&M, Mike Evans. He finished with 6 receptions for 91 yards and a receiving touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, their elite linebacker, Devin White, led the team in tackles. He had 10 tackles and a sack and a half. Their defensive end, Shaquille Barrett, would finish with 3 tackles as he had a sack and a half for himself. And then their corner, Richard Sherman, would go on to finish with the team's lone interception. With this win, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are now 10-3. With this loss, the Buffalo Bills are now 7-6. Last but not least, taking a look at what's going on in Green Bay and Lambeau. The Packers hosted their division rivals, the Chicago Bears, for Sunday Night Football, and the Packers were able to pull away with a 45-30 win at home. The Bears outscored the Packers 27-21 in the first half. The Packers outscored the Bears 24-3 in the second half. On the losing end of this matchup, the Chicago Bears were led by their young elite starting quarterback, their rookie Justin Fields. Fields would complete 18 of his 33 passes as he threw for 224 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. He also ran for 74 yards as he combined for 298 total yards of offense. The Bears' leading receiver was Damiere Byrd. He had 2 receptions for 76 yards and a receiving touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, the Bears' leading tacklers were their elite safety Eddie Jackson, Artie Burns, and Roquan Smith. They each finished with 9 tackles on the day. Robert Quinn, their defensive end, finished with 2 tackles as both of his tackles were sacks. On the winning end of this matchup, the Green Bay Packers were led by their goated starting quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers would complete 29 of his 37 passes as he threw for 341 yards and 4 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was A.J. Dillon. He had 15 carries for 71 yards on the day. Their elite running back, Aaron Jones, had 5 carries for 35 yards and the team's lone rushing touchdown. He also had 3 receptions for 30 yards and a receiving touchdown. He had 65 total yards of offense and 2 touchdowns for the Packers. The Packers' leading receiver was their elite wide receiver, Davante Adams. He had 10 receptions for 121 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their second leading receiver, Allen Lazard, had 6 receptions for 75 yards as he had a receiving touchdown as well. On the defensive side of the ball, the Packers were led in tackles by Devondre Campbell. He had 16 of them. Preston Smith would finish with 4 tackles as he had both of the team's sacks. Chandon Sullivan would finish with an interception, and then Rasul Douglas would end up returning an interception 55 yards all the way to the house. And of course, with this win, the Green Bay Packers are now 10-3 on the season. With this loss, the Chicago Bears are now 4-9. So that covers the NFL games from the 14th Sunday of the season. Taking a look at what went down in the NBA, starting off in Madison Square Garden. The New York Knicks hosted the defending NBA champs, the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks would end up beating the New York Knicks 112-97. The Bucks would end up winning this matchup by 15 after they outscored the Knicks by 13 in the first half. On the losing end of this matchup, the New York Knicks were led in scoring by their starting shooting guard out of Kansas, Quentin Grimes. Grimes finished with 27 points, and he would also go on to add 3 steals and 5 turnovers in 40 minutes. Grimes shot 9 for 17 from the field, 7 for 13 from 3, and a perfect 2 for 2 from the foul line. On the winning end of this matchup, the Milwaukee Bucks were led in scoring by their starting small forward, former All-Star Chris Middleton. He finished with 24 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 steals in 32 minutes. He shot 8 for 17 from the field, 4 for 11 from 3, and a perfect 4 for 4 from the foul line. Their elite starting power forward, Giannis Antetokounmpo, finished with 20 points, 10 rebounds, and 11 assists in 32 minutes. He shot 7 for 16 from the field and 6 for 8 from the foul line. With this win, the Milwaukee Bucks are now 18-10. With this loss, the New York Knicks are now 12-15. Taking a look at what's going on with the other New York team, they went to Detroit to face off against the Pistons. The Nets beat the Pistons 116-104. They won this matchup by 12 after they outscored the Pistons by 17 points in the fourth quarter to come from behind and win. On the losing end of this matchup, the Detroit Pistons were led in scoring by their number 1 overall pick in the 2021 draft, Cade Cunningham, out of Oklahoma State. Cunningham finished with 26 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 steals, and 7 turnovers, all in 36 minutes as he shot 9 for 18 from the field, 5 for 8 from 3, and 3 for 5 from the foul line. Their point guard off the bench from Duke, Frank Jackson, finished with 25 points in 31 minutes. He shot 8 for 19 from the field, 6 for 13 from 3, and 3 for 4 from the foul line. On the winning end of this matchup, the Brooklyn Nets were led in scoring by their goated starting power forward, Kevin Durant. He finished with 51 21 points, 7 rebounds, 9 assists, 2 blocks, and 5 turnovers in 41 minutes. He shot 16 for 31 from the field, 5 for 10 from 3, and 14 for 15 from the foul line. And of course, with this win, the Brooklyn Nets are now 19-8. With this loss, the Detroit Pistons are now 4-22. Now taking a look at what's going on in Oklahoma City, the Thunder hosted the Dallas Mavericks from just over the state lines. The Mavericks would end up beating the Thunder 103-84. The Mavericks won this matchup by 19 after they outscored the Thunder by 9 in the second quarter and by 10 in the fourth quarter. On the losing end of this matchup, the Thunder were led in scoring by their starting point guard out of Kentucky, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Shai finished with 18 points, 5 assists, and 2 blocks in 33 minutes. He shot 6 for 15 from the field and 5 for 6 from the foul line. On the winning end of this matchup, the Dallas Mavericks were led in scoring by their starting point guard out of Villanova, Jalen Brunson. Brunson would go on to finish with 18 points and 9 rebounds in 31 minutes. Brunson shot 6 for 14 from the field, as he also shot 5 for 6 from the foul line. With this win, the Dallas Mavericks are now 13-13. With this loss, the Oklahoma City Thunder are now 8-18. Taking a look at what's going on in San Antonio, in Texas, the Spurs hosted the New Orleans Pelicans. The San Antonio Spurs would beat the Pelicans 112-97. They won this matchup by 15 after they outscored the Pelicans by 14 in the fourth quarter. On the losing end of this matchup, the Pelicans were led in scoring by their elite starting small forward out of Duke, Brandon Ingram. Ingram finished with 27 points, 7 rebounds, and 9 assists in 38 minutes. He shot 11 for 25 from the field and 5 for 8 from the foul line. On the winning end of this matchup, the San Antonio Spurs were led in scoring by their starting center, Jakob Poeltl, and their starting point guard, Derek White. Poeltl finished with 25 points, 12 rebounds, and 2 blocks, all in 34 minutes. He went on to shoot 10 for 12 from the field on the day. Derek White finished with 24 points, 8 rebounds, 9 assists, and 4 steals in 34 minutes. He shot 9 for 17 from the field and a perfect 5 for 5 from the foul line. With this win, the San Antonio Spurs are now 10-16, and with this loss, the New Orleans Pelicans are now 8-21. Taking a look at what went down in Portland, the Trailblazers hosted the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Timberwolves would end up beating the Trailblazers 116-111. They would win this game by 5 after they outscored the Trailblazers by 7 in the first quarter. They kind of rode that momentum through the end of the game. On the losing end of this matchup, the Portland Trailblazers were led in scoring by their elite starting point guard. He led the starters in scoring. Damian Lillard finished with 24 points, 11 rebounds, and 6 assists alongside 5 turnovers in 37 minutes. He shot 5 for 17 from the field, 3 for 14 from 3, and 11 for 15 from the foul line. The Trailblazers were led in scoring by their shooting guard off the bench, Anthony Simmons. He finished with 26 points in 33 minutes. He shot 9 for 20 from the field, 6 for 12 from 3, and he will go on to shoot 2 for 3 from the foul line. On the winning end of this matchup, the Minnesota Timberwolves were led in scoring by their starting small forward, the number 1 overall pick from the 2020 NBA draft, Anthony Edwards, out of Georgia. He finished with 24 points in 29 minutes as he shot 7 for 13 from the field and 8 for 9 from the foul line. Their elite starting center, Karl Anthony Towns, finished with 23 points and 10 rebounds as well as 4 assists and 5 turnovers in 35 minutes. He shot 7 for 17 from the field and 9 for 10 from the foul line. Their elite starting point guard out of Ohio State, D'Angelo Russell, finished with 18 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 steals in 35 minutes. D'Lo shot 5 for 12 from the field, 4 for 8 from 3, and 4 for 6 from the foul line. With this win, the Minnesota Timberwolves are 12-15, and with this loss, the Portland Trailblazers are 11-16. Last but not least, taking you down to Staples Center, the Los Angeles Lakers beat the Orlando Magic 106-94 last night. They won that matchup by 12 after they outscored the Orlando Magic by 26 points in the third quarter itself. On the losing end of this matchup, the Magic were led in scoring by their starting point guard, Cole Anthony. Anthony finished with 21 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists in 35 minutes. He shot 6 for 18 from the field, 4 for 11 from 3, and 5 for 6 from the foul line. Their starting small forward, Franz Wagner, finished with 20 points and 7 rebounds in 39 minutes. Wagner shot 8 for 18 from the field, 2 for 5 from 3, and he would shoot 2 for 4 from the foul line. On the winning end of this matchup, the LA Lakers were led in scoring by their goated starting small forward, LeBron LeBron James. LeBron James finished with 30 points, 11 rebounds, 10 assists, 3 blocks, and 6 turnovers in 37 minutes. LeBron shot 12 for 20 from the field, 3 for 7 from 3, and 3 for 4 from the foul line. Their elite starting point guard, Russell Westbrook out of UCLA, finished with 19 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 steals. He also finished with 5 turnovers in 35 minutes as the NBA's all-time leader in triple-doubles, finished shooting 9 for 18 from the field and 1 for 2 from the foul line. With this win, the Los Angeles Lakers are now 15-13, and with this loss, the Orlando Magic are now 5-23 on the season. Taking a look at what went down with international soccer overseas, starting off in the English Premier League, it looks as though the Tottenham matchup did get postponed due to other factors. Looking at what's going on in La Liga, Barcelona drew against Osasuna 2-2, and looking at what went down in the Madrid derby, Real Madrid was able to beat Atletico Madrid 2-0 as their first goal came from their elite French striker, Karim Benzema, their second goal coming from Marco Asensio. Taking a look at what is going down in Serie A, the reigning Serie A champs, Inter Milan, hosted Cagliari and we were able to pull off a 4-0 win, 2 of their goals coming from Lautaro Martinez. Looking at what's going on in Ligue 1, Paris Saint-Germain was able to beat AS Monaco 2-0 as their 2 goals will come from their elite French forward Kylian Mbappe. In the reigning Ligue 1 champs, Lille were able to draw versus Lyon, Olympique Lyonnais. And following that is currently what the world of sports is looking like following yesterday's matchups. First, I want to thank the NCAA, NFL, NBA, and FIFA websites for giving me all the facts and figures that I needed in order to do this episode. And of course, I want to, apologize for all the names that I butchered while doing this episode as well. And I want to thank everyone once again for listening to all 41 minutes of this piece. I hope all is well. And once all of today's exhibitions and matchups are done, I will come back tomorrow on Tuesday, December 14th for another episode. So until then, thanks for listening. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you with more tomorrow. Thanks for listening to my piece. Peace out.